Welcome. You're listening to The Aligned Self, Conversations in Creating a Conscious and Abundant Life. This is Daniel Denovi. I'll be your guide and host. Let's see just where we can take this. Hello, friend, and welcome back to the conversation. A couple episodes ago, I talked about how you live your whole life in your head. Now, one of the things that keeps that at bay for us or isn't useful information is a lack of self-awareness. Now, one of the things that I've promised in this podcast, it's at the beginning of every episode in the introduction, where the purpose of this podcast is to actually increase conscious awareness. Now, the interesting thing about becoming aware, that once you become aware of something that you were once not aware of, you can hardly remember not being aware of it. Said another way, once you know, you can't unknow it. Now, over the last year, in all the case studies that I've done on subpersonalities, and if you don't know what subpersonalities are, you're new to the podcast. I've been researching for my book, which is coming out this summer, on integrating our different subpersonas or sub-aspects of our overall self-identity. You see, when we're born, we're not born with a fully developed self-concept. We put it together piece by piece, event by event, and when we bump up against a challenging situation, a stressful situation, more often than not, there is a sub-persona or a sub-personality created to deal with that stress. And that sub-personality has its own set of beliefs, its own agenda, its own strategy to adapt or overcome that particular stressor or a particular life challenge, and it operates independently of your overall self. Now, what's interesting, and I wasn't really aware of this, and this is all an increase in awareness. What was interesting is that I discovered that the persona that most people present to the world is actually just another subpersonality. It just is a dominant subpersonality, and it's somewhat unaware of the other subpersonalities. And when that dominant subpersonality creates an intention and the other subpersonalities don't agree, or they have a different plan, a different strategy, and they will derail this dominant subpersonality's intention, the dominant subpersonality says, there's a part of me that is sabotaging my efforts. Well, in some ways it's true. But in actuality, from a total perspective, not all the parts are aligned. Not all the personalities or subpersonalities are aligned with one intention. Everyone has subpersonalities. Now, I'll do another episode that dives deeper into subpersonalities, some of the things that I've learned aside from what I just shared. But the people that changed and transformed the fastest had a higher degree of self-awareness. They were actually able to self-reflect, check in with themselves. They had almost a vocabulary or a rapport of great value with myself, working with my other than conscious mind ever since I was 13, practicing self-hypnosis, going deep into trance, and actually having a dialogue with my subconscious mind. I have developed an inner rapport. Now, psychology refers to this as felt sense, but it's somewhat ambiguous. They don't really define it. It's kind of an ambiguous skill set, and there's no way, or there's very few ways to teach it. And so I've been investigating how to teach and increase self-awareness. Part of it, most of you are aware of mindfulness meditation. That's probably the best way or the fastest way to be able to check in with how are you feeling, becoming present to your current sensations. And if you want help with that, you can go to yesdaniel.com and get my free mindfulness meditation. It's a 24-minute meditation where I guide you in a body scan, body part by body part, and you actually tune in to the sensations that's going on in that body part. But with that aside, how do we begin to self-reflect? Well, for the most part, we start asking questions. What do I feel? How do I feel? What am I feeling? Not necessarily why am I feeling it, because we usually get a story, but become present to the actual sensation. Where is it in your body? How would you describe it? Is there an adjective? Is it heavy? Is it light? Does it have pressure? Is it dense? Is it airy? Is it vibrating or pulsating? Is it pointed? Or there's a whole list of adjectives that we refer to as submodalities in NLP. But there are subcomponents of these inner sensations that once we begin talking about it, and personally, I didn't have those vocabulary when I was younger, and I essentially had 3 states of being. I felt really good, okay, or not so good. I had no real way of tuning into the variety of sensations or variety of feelings that were coming up in my body. That was an aspect that was outside my awareness. Now, also in that episode where I talked about we live our whole life in our head, I mentioned that our goal, according to Jung, and I agree with Jung, is to take our unconscious and bring it into conscious awareness. And then once we're conscious of it, then we can choose it or release it. But without that awareness, these other than conscious programs operate in the background outside our conscious presence, conscious awareness. So again, we ask ourselves questions. Now, journaling is a great act for this. Contemplative meditation. Actually go in an inquiry and look at the different situations. Again, in inquiry, we're investigating, we're entertaining ideas. We're not necessarily married to the idea. We're just kind of playing with the idea around in our head. We're looking at it from different perspectives. Now, for me, NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, when I learned that, it opened up my own personal awareness. It gave me many tools to reflect inside, to actually look at the different thought processes. How was I actually creating emotional states based on how I was thinking and what I was thinking? Now, obviously, I can't share all the details of that toolbox here in this episode, but what I can share is one of the tools from NLP, and that is the 5 perceptual positions. You can take any challenge, any situation, and run it through each perceptual position to gather new, invaluable information. Now, the first position is seeing the situation through your eyes. Now, there's a lot of information you can ascertain from this position, but it's useful if you adopt what I said in that earlier episode, you live your whole life in your head. Whatever you're currently aware of is because it's within you. So if you see something in another person and it bothers you or irritates you, then more than likely it's within you to some degree. And it's something you have not yet handled. And so when another person mirrors that aspect to you and it upsets you, it's because your own frustration and upset is buried underneath. And this becomes an area of investigation. And frankly, I think I need to do a whole episode on that. But for now, I can leave you with this question. When something happens and you internalize it, you need to ask yourself, what am I making this mean about me? If someone says something or does something to you, what does it validate, or what story within you does it confirm? For instance, when my wife sometimes interrupts me, or she appears to interrupt me, when I get the sense that I'm being interrupted, what I make that mean is that she doesn't value what I have to say, that listening to me isn't worthwhile, that her thoughts are more important. You see, I'm taking a seemingly innocuous event. The fact of the matter is she just said something when I was speaking. I interpreted it that I was being interrupted. And then I further got upset, or would get upset, because I internalize when I get interrupted like that, it means such and such, which can usually be summarized up as disrespect. Is that what she means? Not necessarily. Is that what I'm making it mean? Absolutely. Is it the truth? Not necessarily. So, from any given experience, you have your perception through your eyes. How does it affect you? What does it mean to you? What's the impact to you? What's it giving to you or taking from you? So, the second position is actually putting yourself in the other person's shoes, actually looking from the entire situation from their perspective with their beliefs. And these you're going to have to kind of approximate because you don't know for sure. But this is the whole practice of empathy. If you were to actually get out of your skin and put yourself in their shoes and ask yourself, how is it for them to deal with me? Now, get this, most people cannot do this. This is a higher level intelligent act. Putting yourself in someone's shoes and actually seeing the world from their eyes. adapting their beliefs, adapting their motivations. In the last episode, I talked about a 6-year-old who had messed up the countertop in the bathroom because he got toothpaste all over it. And the mother was really upset. And she basically said the kid's inept. He just keeps making a mess. And I took the position, I put myself in the shoes of that 6-year-old. Now, a 6-year-old can just look over the top of the counter. He isn't quite that tall yet. And he's trying to do a good job. And, he drops the toothpaste and he doesn't want to waste it and he tries to get it back on. He wants to brush his teeth himself. He doesn't want help anymore. And I had this whole scenario from the perspective of the 6-year-old. And once I offered that up, the mother could not see it then. She had a different compassion, a different perspective. Once upon a time when I was a courier at FedEx Express, I had a coworker, Sharon. For the most part, my whole working relationship with her was pretty good, but suddenly she started being rather cantankerous. She would get upset. She'd swear at me and cuss at me, and I didn't know what went on, but I was looking at the whole situation from my eyes, and underneath my breath, to myself, I would say, God, what a bitch. And it really got to the point where I didn't want to interact with her at all, but I had to because I kind of worked next to her. But it was difficult, and I just had this running internal dialogue about how terrible Sharon was. Well, one Monday I showed up to work and I got the news. Sharon had died of a brain tumor over the weekend. She had known about it for the last 6 months and she was pissed. She didn't tell anybody. She told a select few. I certainly didn't know. But suddenly, all the judgment that I had about Sharon and her anger and her cussing at me, and it went away because I understood she was dying. And I was able to put myself in her shoes. If I was dying, would I continue to work? How would I be frustrated? What would be going through my head? I was left with nothing but compassion for Sharon. Now, that was a very poignant learning experience. From that point forward, I realized you never know what's going on with another person. You don't know what trials and tribulations they're up against, what upsets, are they at the end of their rope? And you just happen to be dealing with them? Did they just find out that their spouse wants a divorce or that their child is on drugs and they don't know how to deal with it? No matter what's going on with another person, you really have no idea and you have no position in order to judge them. You do not have their life. Now, something that's important to realize about this second position is that it encompasses a mistake a lot of people make when taking in information, especially about other people. And that is a distortion process that we go through when we mind read what another person is probably thinking. But we make that assessment based on our point of view most typically. And this is a distortion that a lot of people that identify themselves as a people pleaser put themselves through. They distort reality because they make an attempt to mind read and hallucinate what the other person could feel or might feel, and then they modify their behavior to avoid any potential conflict. And in the process, they are not authentic. They don't show up as their real selves. They actually are lying to the other person. They're manipulating the situation, all in an attempt to avoid a conflict. This is not what I'm talking about in being in the second position. When you put yourself in the second position, you remove yourself from that equation. It's completely looking at it from their eyes. And then also be in the knowing that anything that you do there is somewhat of a hallucination. It's just an approximation, but it gives you a sense or gives you more information than you would have if you only were looking at the situation through your eyes. The third perceptual position is taking a witness stance or an observer role. Or, in other words, a fly on the wall. If we're talking about a conversation between two people, you have your point of view and there's the other person's point of view. This is like an impartial observer standing off to the side. You can watch the emotional temperament and you're not involved, and it's like, whoa, something's going on there. It's just another level of information. Now, this is a great place to go into in meditation because you have the observer that observes your thoughts, observes your behavior. It's not really you. It's an observer. It's an aspect of your consciousness that can actually self-reflect. Now, it's something that I would do when I was a kid and I was mowing the lawn. I would pretend that other people, someone else out there was observing my performance and making an assessment of how well I was doing. Now, I had my point of view on my idea of how the lawn should be cut, but I thought, how were other people perceiving the quality of the lawn job I was doing? If someone was to come along after I cut the lawn and I was no longer there, would they take a look at the yard and say, that is a nice lawn? Now, I have to admit, this thinking did get me to go to my dad and say, I think we should do something about the weeds in our yard. And he said, I can't get rid of the weeds in our yard. It's all weeds. If we get rid of the weeds, we won't have a lawn. And I pleaded with him and said, well, our lawn doesn't look as good as Stan's across the street. And he said, well, Stan really loves his yard. I don't love my yard that much. It serves a purpose and it does its job. Now, something that's important to realize about this third position, the witness position, is that for you, there is no emotional content when you're observing a situation, a dynamic from this point of view. It's merely as an impartial observer. You do not have a vested interest. Now, most often I've been able to look at myself, my behavior after the fact. How did I perform in a particular situation? What did I say? How was I being? What was the emotional content? And sometimes I was embarrassed afterwards. While I was looking at it, it was just information. But afterwards, once I took stock of the new information, I needed to change my behavior. And I often did. Now, this just popped in my head, and this is another way to think about it because this is pervasive in today's culture. Chances are, no matter wherever you go, you're under surveillance, closed-circuit TV, surveillance cameras. You're being recorded. Would you act any differently knowing that you're being recorded, or are you oblivious to it? Imagining what they will see on that video camera as you shop, as you shoplift, whatever you're doing in the store. What would it look like to the security or the manager when they review that footage? In that imagining, it's just a different layer of information, a different level of perception that witness position affords you. Now, each of these perceptual positions just gives you a different perspective, a different set of information than you would have if you only had your point of view. All right. Now, the fourth position, I like to call it this systems position. It's kind of the interrelatedness of different aspects. Metaphorically, I like to think of myself standing on a fourth floor office, and it's all glass and it overlooks a plaza. And in the plaza between two buildings, there's a restaurant, an outdoor cafe, and there's people eating there, different couples. There's a man sitting by themselves. There's the mailman going through. There's a bicycle delivery guy riding through. There's a lot of different activities going on all at once, and they're somewhat all interrelated on an expanded playing field. So the fourth perceptual position asks questions like, what is the interrelatedness of these different activities? How do they impact each other? What is the ripple effect or the consequential impact? Let's say the couple that's in the cafe leaves all their stuff on the table. They don't take it to the trash, and somebody else has to come along and clean it for them. If you have a company or if you work for a company, you have a downline customer service. You have customers that are downline from your activities. And then you have an upline customer service, people that depend on your activity. And there might be people that utilize your activity somewhere else in the company. Say if you're in marketing, there's sales and there's fulfillment. And then do you think about how you impact these other systems, these other groups? Now, early in my childhood, and I'm ashamed to say this, but it was kind of the law of the land. It's culturally what we did, is if you had litter or trash, you just threw it on the ground. You threw it out the window when you're driving along. Like you didn't really care. It's like that's where it went, and trash was all over the road. And then in the early 70s, after we saw the Earth from space, and we saw this blue jewel sitting in the black expanse of space, and we realized we're not getting off this. It's self-contained, and so we better start taking care of it. Hence the ecology movement. We started taking care of our litter and our trash, and that became part of my makeup, is to make sure that I didn't contribute to the problem. And then after decades of changed behavior, I'm in a port city in Honduras, a small village. And my host, the group that I was with, they threw trash on the street, and I chastised them. It's like, what are you doing? Like, you're dumping trash right where you live. And she asked me, what am I supposed to do with it? And I said, put it in a trash can. And she looked over at the trash can. It was overflowing. They had no waste disposal process. So from her point of view, what else was she supposed to do with it? What this experience did for me from a fourth perceptual position was that I saw that there were different practices in different places in the world under different needs. And it also brought to bear the whole problem or challenge of handling trash, the refuse of living. The actions of the individuals impact the community. And then not only the community of people, but also the wildlife, the fauna, the overall environment, from just this example. The fifth perceptual position is the God position. If you are God and you are looking at the circumstances and trials of your life, what is the divine plan? How does this serve you? What is the lesson? If you have a satellite view of the earth, there are no boundaries. There are no divisions between states and countries. It's all one terrain. And if God, Goddess, all that is interested in your higher development, what is the lesson? Why were you in this activity? What's the grand plan? How will this change the trajectory of your life? Now, this is another way to look at your past when you look at different situations and how it's set up, how you are today, how there's many ways you are now that could not be possible had you not gone through a particular trial or an event or a relationship. My first marriage did not work out, but truthfully, my life would not be the same had I not gotten married. I would not be here. I would not be on this podcast. There were decisions that I made out of that set up everything. So if I were to imagine a different timeline, it's almost impossible because virtually none of what I have today would be in my experience had I not gone through that singular relationship. So those are the 5 perceptual positions from NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And if you're not sure what NLP is, it is a communication model that takes a look at how we create subjective experience. How do we process information in order to arrive at a particular skill set or an emotional response? Now, originally it was created in a therapeutic context to use for personal development and personal change. It has since been applied to business and education in just about every area of life. Because if you think about it, every area of life includes people. And how people communicate, how they interact, makes a difference. If you want to dive deeper and learn the principles, learn the techniques, learn the strategies involved in NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, then you can learn from me. Or there's other places you can learn, but I'm making it easy for you just joining my online community where I have a number of courses, and one of those courses is the Practitioner Level Certification Training of Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Now, you don't need to do anything with that certification, but it gives you all the bases. And every other course that's there is based on principles from NLP, so it is very user-friendly. There's a link in the show notes, or you can go to yesdaniel.com to learn more. I will say the average cost to get certified is between $3,000 and $5,000, but I'm offering it for a fraction of that in the group experience. Next week or the week after, I'll do an episode dedicated entirely to self-reflection to increase personal awareness. But for now, if you just run your awareness through the 5 perceptual positions, you're going to have an increased level of perception and awareness than you ever had before. Until next time, this is your friend and host, Daniel Denovi, urging you to follow your bliss. Live your life from inner signals, be inner directed as you engage in the epic adventure.